When we think of protection in war, our minds go to helmets, trenches, and steel bunkers. But during World War II, not every soldier had steel, or shelter, or even a roof over his head. In the frozen forests of Russia, the flooded fields of France, and the shattered ruins of Italy, many fought with only the ground beneath them. And somehow, that very ground became their greatest ally. Because the same mud that swallowed boots, jammed rifles, and crippled tanks also saved lives. This is the forgotten story of how soldiers turned earth into armor, and how mud, simple, ugly mud, became one of the most effective survival tools of the entire war. On paper, every army was prepared for the cold and for combat, but war rarely follows plans. By the winter of 1941, the German army in Russia had reached its breaking point. The rains came, turning every path into an ocean of sludge. Engines stalled, horses sank, and wheels disappeared beneath the surface. Yet, within this chaos, something unexpected emerged. Soldiers realized that mud, though heavy and filthy, absorbed bullets better than wood, softened explosions, and insulated against deadly winds. They began to use it deliberately, smearing it over helmets, packing it into sandbags, and coating bunker walls until even artillery seemed to lose its sting. It all began as camouflage. Men smeared mud across their faces and hands to blend into the ground. But soon they noticed something else. When the mud dried, it trapped warmth. The wind couldn't cut through it. The cold bit a little less. In diaries from the Eastern Front, soldiers wrote about packing wet clay into the seams of their coats and boots. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked. This layer of dirt created a crude but effective insulation, sealing out freezing air. It was the same principle as animal fur or a bird's feathers. Air trapped between layers slowed the loss of body heat. Only here, nature itself provided the coat. The more they used it, the more they understood its value. A wall of wet mud could stop fragments that would have torn through canvas or thin wood. When shells exploded nearby, the soaked earth absorbed the shock instead of bouncing it onward. Even riflemen learned that crouching behind a mound of sticky soil offered surprising protection. It was heavy, messy, and slow, but far safer than nothing at all. In the Battle of the Bulge, American engineers filled damaged sandbags with mud because supplies ran low. The result? The makeshift barricades held. Proof that sometimes nature builds better armor than factories. So why did it work? Because mud is a master at trapping air. Each particle of clay and silt creates millions of tiny air pockets. Those pockets break the path of heat, sound, and pressure waves. When mud dries, it hardens into a crust that deflects energy. When wet, it flexes, absorbing impact instead of transmitting it. That's the same principle used today in modern blast barriers and earthen bunkers. In a sense, every foxhole filled with mud became a living experiment in field physics. When the snow came, soldiers dug deeper. They lined dugouts with clay, packed walls with wet soil, and sealed cracks to block drafts. A trench lined with mud and straw could stay several degrees warmer than one left bare. In ruined barns, resistance fighters used mud mixed with hay as insulation, plastering it between bricks. On the Italian front, Allied troops did the same to keep bunkers from collapsing under rain. Even when everything froze, the inner layer of mud remained slightly damp, and that dampness trapped warmth like a living skin. Of course, mud wasn't perfect. Too much of it meant trouble. Rifles jammed, boots tore apart, and the constant moisture bred disease. Trench foot, frostbite, infection. It was a constant battle between staying dry and staying alive. But soldiers learned balance. They used mud strategically. around shelters, across exposed skin, or as armor for makeshift defenses. Every handful had to count. It wasn't comfort they sought, but survival. This trick spread far beyond Europe. In the Pacific, U.S. Marines smeared mud mixed with ash over their bodies to block the tropical sun and mosquitoes. In North Africa, British crews covered their desert vehicles with a paste of dust and mud to reduce shine and reflect heat. From the frozen east to the burning west, one principle remained. When steel failed, earth endured. There was also a psychological edge. Once coated in mud, men felt invisible. They were no longer clean targets. They were part of the landscape itself. This mattered more than we might think. A soldier who believed he could vanish in plain sight moved with confidence. He aimed steadier, breathed calmer, and survived longer. Mud didn't just hide them from sight. It hid them from fear. When engineers studied the aftermath of shelling, they found something remarkable. The simplest bunkers, those made of compacted earth, often outlasted concrete ones. Concrete cracked under repeated shock waves. But earth, being flexible, absorbed the energy like a sponge. The lesson was clear. Sometimes softness survives what strength cannot. Strip away the uniforms and rifles, and that same lesson still applies today. Mud remains one of the most accessible and versatile natural insulators. Campers and survivalists still use it to seal wind gaps in shelters or line fire pits for better heat retention. A thin coating on exposed skin prevents sunburn and windburn alike. A jug sealed with mud stays cool longer under the sun. What soldiers discovered by necessity, we can use by choice. A reminder that survival begins not with tools, but with understanding. War pushes humanity to invent, adapt, and improvise. For every complex weapon, there's a simple idea that saved just as many lives. Mud, straw, snow, materials too ordinary to notice, became the difference between freezing and fighting on. That's what made them powerful. They required no supply chain, no technology, only awareness. A soldier who knew the land could turn it into protection. A soldier who ignored it often didn't survive the night. Even today, modern militaries still build on this wisdom. Blast walls made from packed dirt protect bases better than steel alone. Earthen berms line runways and bunkers across every modern war zone. The science hasn't changed, only the tools have. Nature's defense system still works, as it always did, one handful at a time. So when you picture a WWII soldier crawling through mud, don't just see misery, see invention, see ingenuity. Because that same mud that stained his uniform might have been what saved his life. It blurred the line between man and earth, soldier and survivor. It proved that in war, intelligence isn't only in machines, but in the quiet understanding of how the world itself works. Mud was armor, shelter, and camouflage all at once. It turned desperation into design, chaos into survival. And in doing so, it became a silent hero of the Second World War. Because sometimes the simplest things, the dirt beneath our boots, carry the oldest secrets of survival. If you found this breakdown of forgotten World War II ingenuity valuable, subscribe for more deep dives into the fieldcraft, science, and creativity that turned history's hardest moments into lessons for the future. And remember, every inch of Earth has a story. You just have to dig deep enough to find it.